On the subject of payments, please remind the client that vendor load-in and setup cannot take place if there is still a balance due on the day of the event. Clearly, this will drastically affect the event. Please touch base with the client before the big day to help prevent this. If the client adds an item such as a microphone or meals for additional guests to the event on the day it's taking place, it must be paid for in advance before the additional item is actually provided. This policy includes extending the event. That brings me to the topic of the event timeline. Don't forget that if invitations or the planner's timeline don't align with the contract, the bell tower on 34th timeline will prevail. Please make sure all participants are working from the same exact timeline. As I've said, it's a very bad idea to make changes to the timeline on the day of the event. Along the same lines, I'd like to ask that neither you or the client ask vendors to arrive early. Doing that can cause serious issues on event day. Please don't direct wedding party members or guests to arrive early either. The times in the contract are the ones our operations team uses. On the day of the event, if anything fails to take place according to plan, please notify the bell tower event producer or an event manager immediately. Moving on. Every event has some kind of audio-visual element. Please plan to have all of your audio-visual equipment, devices, and presentations tested and conduct a sound check at least 30 minutes prior to guests arriving. This includes laptops, slideshows, live feed, music feed, and internet connections. Ideally, audio-visual testing should be in the event timeline. Will vendors be eating at the event? We need to know how many people are coming in each vendor category, from photographers to videographers to bands, and when they're going to eat. We also need to know where they plan to eat. Do they want to go through the buffet or do they need a separate area? By the way, we do offer band waiting rooms for an extra fee based on availability. Band members can take breaks there and eat their meals in the room. While we're talking about vendors, let's take a moment to discuss photographers. We understand that photographers arrive with their own timeline and a list of shots they may need to get. However, they need to understand that some photo opportunities may not be available when the photographer wants them. Part of the challenge is photographers don't always realize that they are limited to the areas of the bell tower on 34th that are in the client's contract, usually specific rooms and possibly an outdoor area. It would be helpful if you touch base with the photographer, found out what their goals are for the event, and pass them along to us. When photographers work with us and respect our policies, we do our best to accommodate reasonable requests. We just have to take them on a case-by-case basis. Guest planners should also remind clients that outside alcohol is not allowed. Anything other than alcohol provided by and served by our staff will be a problem. The alcohol will be confiscated and there will be an automatic fine per can or bottle. Not only that, the event could be closed down with no notice or refund. A few more details about our alcohol policies. We do not offer individual shots of alcohol. We don't provide alcohol by the bottle. And again, alcohol is poured exclusively by our staff. If you need anything during the event, it's best to follow the chain of command, starting with the event producer, event manager, expediter, and service manager. But if that's impossible, you can ask any staff member for help. Each has a handheld radio that allows them to reach the person you need. That's the most effective way to get your request or question answered. And although I know it's tempting, please don't step in, assume the role of event producer or director, and give our staff orders. It creates problems when planners try to pull staff members away from their assigned tasks to help with last-minute projects like folding, assembling, or distributing things. The same applies to asking staff members to move floral arrangements. That isn't one of their responsibilities, although sometimes we do make that happen as long as it's planned in advance. Planners also have been known to get after staff members when it appears to them that the reception room setup isn't progressing the way they'd like to see it. But don't worry, the reception will be ready for guests in plenty of time. Staff members have been trained to set up areas in the order that guests will see them. So please pass that along to the client. I'd like to touch on the subject of extra guests. Throughout an event, our staff conducts head counts just to make sure the number of guests matches the totals provided to the bell tower. Methods for determining if additional guests have arrived include plate counts, guest chair counts, manual guest counts, car counts, and key counts. We typically rely on eyewitnesses and in some cases video to back up our findings. The point is, clients should know that ambushing us with unplanned guests is not a good idea. It's not fair to our staff and it dramatically undermines our ability to deliver excellent events. Let's talk about our bridal suites next. Suites are available for 2 hours before the event. Our staff is not allowed to do cleanups there unless the client or client's representative is present. That policy protects everyone involved. I'd like to move to the topic of day of event planners. Those who respect our team and the bell tower policies get the best results. Our people are very accommodating, but they have limits. When I conducted an informal poll and asked our team members what kind of messages they'd like to pass on to day of event planners, here's what they said. Please do not assume anything is automatically free. Double check the contract so anything that is not on the bell tower agreement that needs to be added usually has an associated cost to it. During a live event, please help us to keep the chain of command intact and work with your bell tower contact. You don't need to direct our staff. We will cascade messages as needed. It doesn't hurt to make requests, but in most cases there are additional charges involved, and we ask planners not to bypass the chain of event leadership I mentioned earlier when they need something that's not in the contract. At the same time, we don't like to see planners barking orders at our staff. Approaching the event leadership is much more effective and very much appreciated. As the event progresses, the event producer typically stays until the cake cutting at weddings or until the meal is served at other events. But they're great about finding you before they leave and introducing you to the event manager, and in many cases, the event manager's second in command. From that point on, your new contacts will be accessible by radio. We should talk about what happens when events need to be extended. In many cases, clients request event extensions in advance, pay the additional fee, and the extension is included in their event timeline. Sometimes, though, guests are having such a great time that the client decides to ask for more time. That is an option depending on the availability of the venue rooms they're using. It's much more doable during nighttime events. If the space is available, the client speaks to their event team contact and pays $2,500 or 10% of the total contract amount per hour, whichever is greater. The bell tower on 34th will accept credit cards, cash, or a cashier's check when you're extending an event. Now, sometimes we ask clients to pay for extensions for other reasons. Sometimes guests arrive early. Other times the event is over, the lights come on, and the DJ stops, but for whatever reason, the party continues. In either case, whether the event time is extended due to early arriving guests or guests who don't depart on time, payment for overtime charges will be due immediately. Also, if the event started an hour early because the wrong times were put on invitations, we consider the event underway as soon as the early guests arrive. That's considered extending an event by ambush, and the client is responsible for paying for it. Let's take a closer look at the last few moments of an event. In many cases, if there's a DJ, that's the person who directs people to line up for the send-off or dismisses guests. Our light crew, valet, and staff are great about coordinating the end of the event activities with the DJ or whoever is wrapping things up. If alcohol was served, we do not encourage a last call. That usually results in a mass rush to the bar for one more last drink. Please remember that events, including the send-off finale, cannot feature sparklers, fireworks, or fog devices of any kind, including haze machines. All of these things are prohibited on the premises, whether they're brought by the client, a guest, a vendor, or anyone else. Another quick note on items used during send-offs. Water-soluble confetti is great as long as it's kept outdoors. We don't allow it inside because it stains our floors. Now, for a few after the event details. All items used for decorating must be removed at the end of the event. Items left overnight will become the property of the bell tower on 34th. If the vendors do not clean up after themselves, the client will automatically be charged an additional fee. We'd appreciate it if you, the planner, make sure that the vendors remember that. We want them to know that if they don't clean up, they'll cost their client money and probably get a very negative review. We're not responsible for lost or stolen items, but if something is left behind unintentionally, we'll try to help people get it back. We have a lost and found link at the bottom of our website with an online form guests can fill out. Plus, our cleaning crew knows to keep an eye out for lost items and have a dedicated area for storing them. Next, car retrieval. While it's rare in the Uber era, guests sometimes leave their cars here when driving home isn't a good idea. They're welcome to do that. They can pick up their car after 9 a.m. on the next day we're open. But a word of warning, we don't always host events on Sundays, meaning cars left on a Saturday night may have to remain with us until Monday morning. When the car owner arrives, all they need to do is come in our main entrance and look for a staff member. We can retrieve their key.